Hello and welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I am your host Deepak. We are delighted to welcome Professor Ashish Sinha from the University of Queensland Business School and Professor Kiran Pedada from Asper School of Business, University of Manitoba. Both faculty members will share their invaluable insights derived from their research on the topic E-commerce disrupted. Is social e-commerce the future of online shopping? We look forward to their expertise shedding light on the future of e-commerce and the rise of social e-commerce platforms. Professor Ashish Sinha is a professor of marketing at the University of Queensland Business School and visiting professor of marketing and research fellow at the Indian School of Business. With extensive leadership experience in the academia and industry, he has served as Academic Dean of Executive Education at ISB, Associate Dean Research, Interim Dean, and Acting Head of Economics at University of Technology Sydney Business School, and as Vice President Analytics Inside Group at IRI Chicago. He has received numerous prestigious academic accolades, including the Davidson Award for Best Journal of Retailing Paper and being twice a runner-up for the Gary Leland Practice Award, recognizing the significant impact of his work on business practices. He was honored with 2013 the Australian and New Zealand Marketing Academy Distinguished Researcher Award and was named as Fellow in 2016. Professor Sinha earned his PhD in marketing science with economics and statistics from the University of Alberta. We have second guest Professor Kiran Pedada. Professor Kiran Pedada is an assistant professor of marketing and the Associate's Fellow in Marketing and Inclusive Business at the Asper School of Business at the University of Manitoba. Previously, he was an assistant professor of marketing and BET Research Fellow at the Indian School of Business. In fall 2018, he was a visiting scholar in marketing at the Canon Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Professor Kiran's research focuses on marketing strategy, particularly its financial and social impact, digital environments, and emerging markets. His work has been published in top academic journals, including Journal of Academy of Marketing Science and International Journal of Research in Marketing, and in practitioner journals like California Management Review and Management and Business Review. His research has also been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and CNN. Dr. Pedada earned his PhD in Business Administration from Texas Tech University, where he won the 2017 Helen David Jones Excellence in Graduation Teaching Award. His doctoral dissertation on International Marketing Alliance Dissolutions in Emerging Markets won the prestigious 2019 AMS Mary Kay Incorporation Doctoral Dissertation Award. His latest book, Product Management in the Digital Era, Theory and Practice, is designed for product managers who are responsible for managing the ideation development, production, marketing, and distribution of a product. It is truly an honor and pleasure to have Professor Ashish Sinha and Professor Kiran Pedada on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deepak, for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Prof.
Deep.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Professor Ashish and Professor Kiran, could you share the origin of your research and how the idea evolved over time? And what inspired you to explore this topic in such depth?
Sure. So let me start, and then I'll hand it over to Kiran. I guess what I recall was that it was a water cooler conversation between me, Kiran, literally a water cooler conversation, and with our other co-authors as well, Prakash Bagri, um, before COVID. And this was about a case study that I had written on Pinduoduo, which was doing exceedingly well, even though it was launched in 2016, was doing exceedingly well. It's got published. CEBS, the China-Europe International Business School, they run an annual case competition, and we had submitted, and we were, one of the finalists. We didn't win it, but we were one of the finalists. And I think all of us felt that this was something that was going to be really big. So we had predicted its success in 2019, but we had a lot of resistance. We had a lot of resistance from different journals, different editors, and I'm glad that, I had someone like Kiran on the paper because had it not been for him, for the way that he, looks at a paper, crafts it, and the perseverance as well, we wouldn't have been successful. So when I say that, because we were writing this paper at a point in 2019, 2020 when this paper was written. Everyone believed that Amazon was untouchable. Right? There were millions of papers that have been written on Amazon and how great Amazon is, its flywheel. For someone to even imagine a company like Temu, right, to disrupt Amazon was not something that anyone would have ever imagined. So you can just imagine how much of resistance we got to this paper. We're very thankful to Managerial and Business Review Journal that they were, and all of us, all the co-authors are very thankful to Kiran that he was a part of this project, because left to me, for instance, I would have given up, and I'm glad that we didn't, because whatever we had predicted has now, after 5 years, come true. I'm not sure whether we'll ever be able to predict something like this again, but certainly for this, we'll take that we were one of the first to predict that this is going to be a very successful business model. Kiran, over to you.
No, thank you for your kind words, Ashish. It was Professor Ashish actually who inspired me to work on this. So I was so fortunate that I got the opportunity to be part of this project, and it has been quite exciting. As Professor Ashish Sinha mentioned, in fact, we predicted it much before this particular paper was published, and now we see the proliferation of all these social commerce companies. So, for example, after I came to Canada, about a year ago, Timu actually made a big splash, in North America with about 30 million advertising investment in Super Bowl, right? So that was the first time people came to know about Timu. But essentially, this particular topic, we actually started writing, I think, at least 4 or 5 years before essentially Timu actually advertised in Super Bowl, right? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Professor Ashish, what factors have contributed to the rapid rise of social e-commerce platforms, and how do they challenge the dominance of traditional e-commerce giants like Alibaba and Amazon?
Sure. So I guess, and it is related to a number of different issues, which we'll be talking about at a later point. So without stealing the thunder too much, one of the things that social e-commerce does really well is that it integrates. I mean, you take a step back and you think about what is social e-commerce. It's the integration of a number of social elements in e-commerce. So when we say social elements, and that's where we differ a lot from even the Western thought on social e-commerce. The Western thought on social e-commerce, if you go to all the marketing journals, IS journals and whatnot it might be, which is also another reason for the pushback, is largely to do with influencer and influencer marketing, right? And the influencer marketing is that someone is recommending a product, and then that has an impact on, whether it is a Kim Kardashian or it could be a micro influencer. But really, social e-commerce is a lot more than that. It's the Western conceptualization of social e-commerce is that. I'm not trying to say that it's incorrect, but it is certainly incomplete. So think of it that in the way most of these e-commerce platforms have been designed is that people have a need for a product. So say, for instance, for a lack of an imagination, toilet paper. And then once you have a need for a particular product, you go online searching for it, and then you buy it. So, and maybe there are some recommendations along the way, so you read the review and says, yeah, this product is good, this product is bad, and so on and so forth. So that's the customer journey, right? I mean, and most of the e-commerce platforms like Amazon, what they're trying to do is make it really efficient. So that means you don't have to search a lot. It doesn't cost you too much money. But when you look at social e-commerce is about the fun element of shopping, which is if you think about brick and mortar shopping, sometimes we go to malls not to buy, but just to have a good time there, right? Window shopping. Now, what social e-commerce has done is integrated not only the influencer side of things, but also games, ways by which customers can be engaged. And that engagement then leads to not only spending more time on that platform, but also buying more and making better decisions because you're invested in it. So, and everything has got the social elements. You're playing games in teams, you're competing as teams, you're going shopping in a group, right? So it's about group buying. All that kind of thing has been embedded think of it in an Amazon type of an platform. And so it makes it not only there's a lot of fun, a lot of engagement, but also on the other side, in the United States, TJ Maxx as an example, where you find branded products at a huge discount, but you really don't know on any particular day what you will get, which is the treasure hunt, right? So it's a treasure hunt. It's the thrill of finding something like a Gucci bag at 1/10 its price. That's exactly what social e-commerce is, because that's the way that we usually shop. It's not in a very mundane sort of, e-commerce environment that Amazon or Alibaba before that Taobao or Tmall would provide. So that I think is the big difference, and that's why they're doing so well. Kiran, over to you.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So, yeah, I think as Professor Ashish Sinha rightly mentioned, so these platforms actually they focus a lot on the user experience for extended period of time, right? So with gamification, right? For example, these social e-commerce platforms, especially Pinduoduo, they leverage this team building, right, through different games. In addition, they actually provide these offers like, if you buy this, it will cost, let's say, for example, $50. But if you invite 5 of your friends and buy this product, and you get like 50% off, for example, right? So these kind of, sort of offers, etc., essentially leveraging social connections, they actually, help these social e-commerce companies to not only drive purchase, but also improve the engagement with the consumers, right? So, and as Professor Ashish Sinha mentioned, this sort of treasure hunt sort of approach that is adopted by the social e-commerce companies is also like a distinguishing feature. For example, the kind of the search tree is based on a sort of a scrolling based, right? So, or a discovery kind of approach, right? So you're trying to actually find some interesting deals, etc. So that also keeps users engaged in the platform, right? So, and Temu here, for example, they use techniques like spin the wheel, and you get a sort of a you win a sort of a jackpot, like $200, sort of coupon, and you can sort of redeem it on products and all. So I think these are some of the things I think the social e-commerce platforms actually tried, and they have also been quite successful in my view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Kiran and Professor Sinha. It's a very insightful journey. Social e-commerce platforms place a strong emphasis on user experience, with interfaces designed to be more engaging and gamified, as you explained. So, how does this approach transform the traditional online shopping experience?
So, Professor Ashish, would you like to take this
Yeah,
question?
Yeah,
sure.
sure, absolutely. To me, it's all about the customer journey. It's all about the customer journey and how the customer journey is being made much more engaging, right? I guess the way that how they change the user interface and some of these examples, Professor Pedada has already provided, right? I mean, how they're spinning the wheel, you take the discount, you get the discount, then it's the team buying. All of this, the purpose behind. So e-commerce, Amazon or Alibaba platforms, the focus has largely been on how to make the shopping experience more efficient. That means, if you've got hundreds of products to search for, how do you just restrict it to 10 or 15 so that the cognitive load on the consumer is less. But what they have forgotten is that shopping is about fun as well. And when I say fun, it's another way to call it would be gamified environments, right? So for instance, PDD, their, so to say, tagline is double the fun and double the discount, right? So not only are you having a lot of fun, but you're also getting really great prices on these products that you've always wanted to buy but didn't have the ability to do so, which is what Temu is doing in North America. So the focus, again, going back to some of the things that Professor Pedada has already talked about, right? The focus is a lot on the user interface, on user engagement. How do you keep them on the platform, right? It's not like in and out. It's not like you're trying to be, you expect your customers just to come on the platform to buy things. And so it's changing the whole experience. Now it's related to, again, this is some of the work that we've done, right? Some with Professor Pedada, but otherwise as well. It's related to this whole notion of flow. Flow is to do with that you are keeping people in a state of flow, which then and it's largely to do used in game design and gamification. That's where the origins of PDD is, right? So you keep people in a state of flow by which you are much more engaged. And because you're much more engaged, it leads to better decision making as well. So it's not like a distraction. It's this flow is helping them not only have more fun, they're more engaged, but also, getting deeper discounts and they are making better decisions. All these four things together. So that's what I think it's about the customer journey. So it's the user interface or the user experience, whatever you want to call it. But it is how do you manage that to keep the engagement high rather than just in and out. Over to Kiran.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sinha. I think, as you rightly mentioned, how you can actually keep the consumers engaged for a longer period of time. That is the most important thing. And what traditional online shopping can actually adopt from this approach is that essentially, trying to find some techniques to engage the consumers better, right? For example, this as Prof. Sinha also mentioned, like this spin the wheel. I think that's a very interesting sort of technique that is a nice gamification technique. I think even traditional online platforms also can actually adopt some of these kind of techniques that might be helpful, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the most important part is, unlike traditional e-commerce sites, social e-commerce platforms leverage both direct and indirect network effects. So could you elaborate on how these effects play a crucial role in the growth and success of these platforms?
Sure, sure. So let me start, and then I'll hand it over to Professor Pedada. So the reason why e-commerce platforms grow so rapidly is because of network effects. And really, the network effects is to do with how consumers, right, they interact with all these different players in the network. And what that does is that the number of customers that come on a particular platform increases very rapidly. So another way to think about it, exponential growth. Exponential growth in the number of customers, exponential growth in the sales, all of that is dependent on what we call as network effects. So there are essentially, even though, we have mentioned in the paper, there are three network effects. One is the cross-site network effects. The second is indirect network effects. And the third is the direct network effects. So what do we mean by that? In a cross-site network effects, take an example of Airbnb. Let's take an example of Uber. That'll be better. Let's take an example of Uber. So as the number of riders increase, they attract more drivers because it's easy for the drivers to get business. Because there are more drivers, the riders are, the convenience increases because the amount of time that they have to wait to get a ride becomes less because there are a lot of drivers at any given point in time, wherever you are, right? So this becomes a virtuous cycle. So this is called a cross-site network effects, that as the number of riders increase, the number of drivers increase. As the number of drivers increase, the number of riders increase. So if you are able to manage this, which is what Uber, Airbnb, Amazon, all of them are able to do this, you increase the number of consumers very quickly because it's a virtuous cycle on which you jump, right? But obviously, the dark side of this is called the vicious cycle, that if that doesn't happen, then companies, you will see a lot of these e-commerce or online companies that die very rapidly because of this reason, because they just can't get this thing to go. So that is one big effect. Then is the direct effect. The direct effect is, how can you make two consumers dependent on each other, right? So a very simple example would be, think of when Alexander Graham Bell came up with a phone. What was the value of the phone? Zero, because he couldn't call anyone. As the number of people who had phones increase, the value of the network increase, right? Which is what is a direct effect. Now, when you look at an e-commerce, and we can talk about indirect, which is, the whole ecosystem and how the ecosystem grows. When you think about e-commerce platforms like Amazon, Taobao, Tmall, right? Most of them have cross-site network effects only. There's no way of how one consumer is dependent on another one. So the more the number of network effects, the faster your company will grow. Because what you're doing then, so while a social e-commerce firm will have both direct, just like, because it's social, like social media, like Facebook, like it'll have the direct effect, as well as the cross-site effects. And its ecosystem becomes a lot bigger because of both these effects. So if you look at how long it took, and this is apples to apple comparison, if you look at how long it took for the hockey stick effect, which is the exponential increase, for Alibaba, it was like 7 to 8 years. For PDD, it took less than 2 to 3 years, because now you've got two network effects, one on top of the other. So that was the excitement around this. That was and this whole team buying, team playing is to make one consumer dependent on another consumer, right? One customer dependent on another customer, which is the reason how they build the direct effects. So the reason why social e-commerce, just on the basis of theory, will do better than an e-commerce platform, the normal e-commerce platforms, right? Is because they have both direct and cross-site effects, while an e-commerce platform like an Amazon has very weak direct effects. And it's not like they have zero direct, but they're primarily driven by the cross-network effects. Yeah, over to
Professor Kiran.
So I think Professor Sinha explained these same side effects and or the direct network effects and the cross side effects very actually nicely. Essentially, as he rightly mentioned, the increase in consumer dependence, right? We see that in the traditional social media, essentially, right? So whether it is Instagram or Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. I think, as he rightly mentioned, the social e-commerce companies actually, kind of try to blend both these. Leverage the benefits of both these direct network effects and the cross-site network effects. So and the example of Pinduoduo, how it has very quickly, has grown, right? So for example, from 2018 to 2020, it grew at a compound annual growth rate of about 50%, right? So I think that is essentially explained by this platform theory, in other words, the network effects. Right? So
Professor Kiran, with platforms like Shopify, BigCommerce, Pinduo, and C Limited gaining global attraction, what are the best practices from these companies that traditional e-commerce platforms can adopt?
So this is a fantastic question, actually. So we talked about it a few minutes ago. One is definitely leveraging, better consumer engagement, right? Through some gamification techniques, that they can immediately adopt. But one of the biggest takeaways from this papers and research for me as well, and in fact, it led to more and more research that we have been doing, is that, the traditional e-commerce companies can actually learn from the success of these social e-commerce companies, is that targeting emerging customers, or in other words, underserved customers. Okay, if you take Pinduoduo, for example, the founder of the company, I think in 2016 or so, felt that about 50% of the mobile phone users in China never used online shopping, right? So I think that's what actually led to starting this Pinduoduo. So when he understood the consumers better, he understood that these consumers actually live in tier 3 and tier 4 cities of China, and mostly the decisions are actually household decisions are made by women in the households, and they don't actually purchase things like gadgets or fashion products or something like that, but they tend to purchase fresh produce, for example, right? Understanding these sort of underserved customer segments or emerging customer segments and actually targeting them, I think that has proven to be quite successful for these social e-commerce companies. So traditional e-commerce companies can actually focus on these things. Even if we take companies like Shopify, for example, right? So they focused on an ignored segment, small and medium enterprises, right? Although Amazon, etc., were focusing on SMEs, but Shopify focused on these SMEs, to create their own online brands, right? So I think that is one thing, like, focus on emerging customers or underserved customers. So that is one of the takeaways. And the other one is, as Professor Sinha mentioned earlier as well, customization, or in other words, customizing to cultures, or localization, right? So unlike in Western countries, in emerging markets, right? So these people actually visit malls not just for shopping, but to actually sort of have social interactions, right? So how can you sort of bring that to the online, the virtual sort of shopping? So that is one thing. That's one takeaway, and the third thing is leveraging data and AI better for personalization, right? So these are the three takeaways, I believe, that traditional e-commerce companies can actually get from these social e-commerce platforms, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Professor Kiran. Professor Sinha, how do you see the future of social e-commerce shaping the broader landscape of online shopping? And the follow-up question for Professor Kiran is, what major trends should business leaders and retailers be aware as they adapt to this shift?
Sure. So I think, I mean, social e-commerce has now, there's absolutely no doubt that it has disrupted e-commerce. In 2023, late 2023, e-commerce, PDD, the market cap of PDD became more than that of Alibaba. And that was something which caught nearly everyone by surprise, because no one would have expected that a no-name company that was started in 2016 would have close to 1 billion customers, right, in 7 years, which again was something that I must say, Kiran and I and Prakash and Professor Srivastav, all of us had predicted this, and no one really believed us. Everyone thought that we were smoking something that you know. So in 2023 that happened, but even when that was happening, the constant sort of narrative was that it is very much an Asian thing, that it will only happen in Asia, it will not happen in the Western countries. And then Temu came along and gave Amazon a really hard time. And Amazon was considered to be an absolute untouchable, right? And some of the things that Professor Pedada just talked about, they did exactly that. So they also noticed that Amazon is not targeting the bottom end of the, so to say, the pyramid, right? I mean, people who want a deal, who want fun, who love discounts, treasure hunt sort of experience is really important. Some of them, including people that I know, would like drive 20, 30 miles in North America to go to a flea market to buy something on discount, of 50% or 70% discount, right? To them, that was the experience. So that Temu managed to recreate online, right? So this is something that is happening right across. So the underserved segment, and there's an underserved segment everywhere. E-commerce platforms will not be able to ever, fill that or fulfill the needs of that particular segment. So there's a big opportunity there. It's about engagement, right? So don't think of online experiences being very different from, the brick and mortar, the offline kind of experiences. And so you need to bring those in, right? So to me, it's here to stay. And e-commerce platforms are on notice, whether it's an Amazons of the world, whether it is the Flipkarts of the world, right? All of them are on notice at this point that if you don't do something in this particular space, you could get disrupted tomorrow. So this is, so what can they learn? Some of the things that Professor Pedada has already mentioned, right? The cultural side, the underserved segment to me. But also think of it that the trust element comes from who's recommending the product. So at one level, we've always, even in marketing today, we've this huge debate, should be a macro influencer like Kim Kardashian, right? Or versus a micro influencer. A micro influencer would be someone who has only 1,000 followers, but is considered to be an expert, a leader in the whole community. Well, Pinduoduo has gone even lower. They're like a Pico kind of an influencer. So that means it's my friends and family. Now, one of the things that you buy brands because you trust the brand and it signifies something. That whole process is now being replaced by, because Kiran is a very good friend of mine, I recommend to him that this is maybe a no-name brand, but this is a really good brand for us to buy. And if we collectively buy, we get a huge discount. Why don't we buy that? So the traditional role of marketing, and not only that, think of it that I'm acquiring Kiran as a customer for the platform. So the customers are doing the job of what traditionally marketing departments would have done, apart from creation of this trust around. So it's a very different way of thinking about things where a lot of the no-name brands might be at par with branded products. Unless, you want to buy a Gucci and you're willing to pay a price premium. But let's suppose if I'm invariant to a brand like a Sony versus a no-name TV, if Kiran was to recommend that to me and say, well, it's as good as that, why do you want to spend this? And it's not conspicuous consumption. It's like nobody gets toilet paper, for instance. Nobody gets to know or produce. So I think what social e-commerce is doing is changing the very nature of marketing, whether it is to do with customer acquisition cost. Customer acquisition cost is very low because it's being outsourced. Then customer retention is higher because of the dependence that we talked about. So the locking in is a lot more, and this is something that all e-commerce platforms have to realize and recognize. And if they don't respond to it positively, and some of the things that Professor Pedada talked about, the engagement experience and all these, there is a high chance. So, for instance, in India, my prediction is it'll be Jio and WhatsApp because they're trying to recreate PDD by having this partnership. WhatsApp is by far the most popular, social media platform that you can think of in India. The uptake is very high, and Jio WhatsApp is their response. And Flipkart is on notice. Guarantee you on that one that you will see that Jio and WhatsApp, that Facebook, that partnership is so important for Jio because what was the role of WeChat for PDD, right? It'll be the same, and for Temu as well to a certain degree, so the lesser. It'll be the same in India. It's going to be the WhatsApp is going to play the role of WeChat, for Jio. So again, this is a prediction, but I think in the next 5 years, you will see that Geo WhatsApp, the Geo online platform, is best positioned to lead the online e-commerce, business in India. So again, this what would be some of the things. Kiran, you want to add something? It seems like
Sure.
you
I
want to.
think, thank you, Professor Sinha. I think you actually, provided some very interesting insights. For example, we trust the judgment of our friends, and that word of mouth. If we really if somebody who we trust is actually recommending something, we tend to look at that suggestion recommendation favorably, right? So I think that is one of the most important aspects of the social e-commerce platforms, and that tremendously reduces customer acquisition cost. I completely agree, and even customer retention cost, because these as we mentioned earlier, these customers are interdependent. So essentially, your customers themselves will retain your other customers and all, right? So that is one thing. And the second point you mentioned, in fact, Dr. Hunt used to say this: to be competitive in any market, you have to be a good collaborator as well, essentially, right? So I think these partnerships, for example, the one Professor Sinha mentioned, like Geo and WhatsApp, okay, even Geo, Facebook. So all these partnerships actually. So when we don't possess, so not every company possesses all the resources, right? So I think what social e-commerce companies actually try to do is to sort of partner with other companies that have complementary resources. So I think that is the way even traditional, commerce companies can actually become more competitive in this evolving market, right?
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add one more thing. I mean, because what you have is data is being leveraged, and AI and data, but obviously, and data now you have from two different sources. One is the transactional data. That means whatever happens on your e-commerce platform, that data Amazon has. But then think of it, on top of that, there is another layer of data, which is the social interactions. So for a company like Geo, WhatsApp, that particular part, or Facebook, and I'm saying when I Facebook, I mean, it's the WhatsApp is the big one, because that's the most popular, so to say, social, media for, or at least the way that people are communicating with each other is WhatsApp. It's like India is the number one market for WhatsApp. So it's another layer of data on top of that. And then what it provides is a lot better insights about a user. The customer profile of Kiran or of Ashish or of Deepak is going to be a lot better on Geo WhatsApp than on Flipkart or on Walmart or on any other e-commerce platform. So the ability for them to predict what are some of the deals that I would like, what are some of the products, and who I can influence, right? Because the influencer marketing is not like, it's an open debate in marketing at this point. I see, should it be macro? Should it be micro? No, it shouldn't be macro, micro. It should be pico. It should be my friend, my brother, my uncle, So Kiran would be a good influencer for me. I would be a good influencer for him, right? Now, those are the sort of 1 degree or 2 degrees separation that can be identified using social media, which you cannot using transactional data. So to me, again, this is a prediction that I think Geo and WhatsApp is going to, in Indian market, is going to prosper like crazy. because they are doing exactly, it may not seem obvious to people, but those of us who have been doing this for the last 5 years, I can tell you that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to replicate a Temu model. They're trying to replicate a PDD model in India, and Flipkart and Walmart are notice at this point.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Now, let's talk about the other side of the platform. So, what are the key challenges and risks social e-commerce platforms face in terms of customer retention, privacy, and data security? And how can they address these issues while maintaining their growth?
I think it's a really great question, and because this is what a lot of social e-commerce firms have previously faced, are currently facing, right? And one of them is that because you're trying to serve the needs of an underserved market, sometimes fake products can proliferate on the platform. And not only that, in case of some of the other companies, very disturbing content because of social media and whatnot, which is in tech, which is a part of this platform, right? It's integrated as a part of the platform. So that can also get distributed, like pornography and things like that. So one of the things you see is, you've got an agency model in e-commerce, which really is like booking.com as an example, where they don't hold inventory. The only thing they are is the go-between. So they go between two parties, the buyer and the seller, and they're in the middle. Now, when agency model, a lot of companies, and so that's one model. The other one is the merchant model. The merchant model is where actually, as a company, you have inventory, you acquire that, and then you sell. Now, usually the agency or the agent model is considered better because the profitability is very high, because you don't need any inventory. The downside of that model, right, is that you have no control over the kind of products that would be made available on your platform. So merchant model is more expensive, but if you have a problem like that, you have to think about you giving up your profitability, at least for some time, till you have a way of identifying the suppliers, the products, such that this doesn't happen. So I think, the privacy concerns, again, that is something that's right across now, whether it is an e-commerce firm, something that all the companies have to deal with. You look at Apple, the very fact that now they have a phone where the claim is that the privacy is a lot better than, and it's not hackable as easily. And the value of iPhone 16, the price premium is massive, and you can see the market gap, how has it gone up? So all these things are really important. And these are some ways by which companies can manage, and they always shouldn't be looking at the bottom line, because if they do look at the bottom line in the long term, so it's about, again, going back to what Professor Pedada talked about, I think previously in one of the podcasts, which is about intangible assets. This is an intangible asset that you're creating, right? Which is the trust in the social e-commerce. And that is a long-term intangible asset. So, initially you have to invest to build that. And you see that happening even now playing out in the Chinese market, because a lot of the firms like Temu, for instance, they have same issues of fake products. And so they're going to a merchant model, right? And so did Alibaba recently. They're going to much more to a merchant model rather than to an agent model for this particular reason, because they want to make sure that anything that is shipped to someone, particularly in the West, it's not of low quality or it's not fake, right? So those are some of the challenges, but it's largely about, the long term, building the intangible assets in the form of brand, in the form of trust, in the form of, and then it becomes a virtuous cycle once you have all those things. And the value of that is massive, right? Apple being a prime example, that when they came up with Apple Intelligence, largely focused on privacy, $600 billion, its value went up. So in the long run, it'll have a huge impact. But in the short run, it may seem like a cost because I would view it much more as an investment in building this whole brand. And then, yeah, over to Kiran, because Kiran is an expert in this area anyways.
No, thank you, Professor Sinha. I think I completely agree. And our research, I mean, which is currently under review with Professor Sinha and Manjunath and Professor Rajan Srivastav. So where we are actually looking at, what actually drives the firm value for companies with disruptive intent, right? Like these social e-commerce companies, like looking at these underserved consumer segments. So two things we found. One is, as Professor Sinha mentioned, the ability of these firms to actually build intangible assets. In other words, market-based assets, okay, like trust, brand equity, channel equity, etc. But what is even more important is the ability to leverage those assets, right? So these intangible asset building capabilities and intangible asset leveraging capabilities, they actually work as complementary for these companies, right? So I completely agree with that, and especially I see in Canada, for example. Some customers are concerned about these issues like, low quality or fake products and things like that. It's very important for these companies to, sort of think long term and, build these intangible assets and find ways to sort of leverage the intangible assets that they build. I think that's how they are actually going to grow in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, professors. Professor, my last question. Do you believe social e-commerce will eventually overtake traditional e-commerce in terms of market share and influence? Or will the two models coexist and complement each other?
It's a great question. And I think I'll take a stab and then, Professor Pedada. I think it'll coexist. And it'll coexist because both of them are targeting different segments. There are a lot of people who don't find shopping a pleasurable experience. And, you think about like buying for Diwali, gifts for Diwali or Christmas or New Year's. Many of us just want to go online. There's a recommendation and from the e-commerce platform, like these things are popular. You just pick one because you essentially are outsourcing the whole shopping experience to the platform, right? Because I just don't have the time. I'm not one of those who enjoys this experience. I'm just going to do that. So, time is of great value to someone, right? So that is for them. I think e-commerce platforms are really great because it's in and out, very efficient process. So if you're time poor and you're trying to make a decision very quickly, e-commerce platforms. But then there is on the other side a segment that values both discounts, but the treasure hunt experience. I want to go out and I spend time. And the fact that I have spent so much time, but still been able to snare up a deal for, say, 50% or 60% brings me a lot of pleasure, happiness. And the fact that I have driven 30 kilometers to buy a gift for my partner, my friend, whoever that might be, highly personalized, right? That when this person opens the present, says, oh my God, this is what I was looking for. So you have different segments, and I think they'll always coexist. But then there are some who are in the middle, right? So those people, they do want a good experience. They don't want to spend too much time, but are also interested in discounts. Now, in every market, the composition of that is going to be more or less. I think in India, discounts would be more. It doesn't mean that, but there'll be a smaller segment on the top. In the West, maybe the segment at the top is bigger. So it'll all depend on that. They will coexist, but the chances of like a Geo WhatsApp versus Flipkart, to me, Geo WhatsApp is a no-brainer. It has got everything. It's got intangible assets. It's got, the partnerships, the collaboration, all those things, like a lot of the work that we've done and some of the published work with Professor Pedada and others as well. So all of that kind of points to that between a Flipkart and a Geo WhatsApp should be the clear winner, right? But can I say that for Temu and Amazon? Less so, because these are two different segments and they're serving two different segments, the needs of two different segments. And each segment, how big they are will define which one is going to dominate. But I can certainly see in every market the coexistence, and also now, particularly in the West, the recognition that this particular business model applies as well. It's not like everyone is, interested. So if you look at, as an example, the number of papers that have been written on PDD and Temu, we would be one of the first to write that. And Amazon, there are millions of papers. So it's a lack of recognition that, this also will have a very important role to play in the online e-commerce landscape. Over to Professor Pedada.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Professor Sinha. I think if we look at the future of e-commerce as such, I agree with Professor Sinha that these two models will coexist. As we talked about, we think social e-commerce is here to stay. In fact, these platforms are doing pretty well, not just in emerging markets, but also in these developed markets in Canada and the US. For example, we talked about Temu. It gets about 700 million visitors every month, right? So, and if you look at like last year, Temu was the most downloaded app in 2024, right? I think there is interest, in both the models, as Professor Sinha said. They actually, cater to different segments, right? So price sensitive and who are actually looking for this kind of treasure hunt experience and, sort of fun experience of shopping, etc. I think these are really exciting times. So let's wait and see how these platforms are going to do going forward. Yeah. Thank you, Deepak.
Yeah. Thank you, Deepak.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Ashish Sinha and Professor Kiran Pedada, for joining us in this episode. We sincerely appreciate your time and valuable insights you share with our audience. To our listeners, we hope you found this discussion enlightening as we did. Stay tuned for next episode when we will dive into more fascinating topics. Thank you once again, Professor Ashish Sinha and Professor Kiran Pedada.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deepak, for providing us this opportunity to share our research and our ideas. So greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, Deepak.